Good evening. Welcome, Alexander.
Good evening, Ray.
So, you're hardly the only leadership theorist who's talked about character as the key to understanding. Various authors have done so, but few make it the singular focus that you do in your work. In fact, in your book, and I figure I might as well get the plug for the book out right away. It will be available for purchase afterwards. You open the book by saying leadership is about character. No, leadership is character. There are those who think one must be born to lead, that some have a knack for it and some do not, that leadership is largely a matter of temperament combined with experience. Not everyone can be a Roosevelt or a de Gaulle or Churchill, so they think, but nothing could be further from the truth. Leadership is not reserved for an elite. It is the vocation not of the few, but of the many. So maybe the place is to start here. Walk us, how did you come to this conclusion? Walk us a bit of the journey of your own thinking about leadership and what led you to this insight, which perhaps is at the heart of some of the things that you talk about in your work.
Well, like Paul said, the beginning of my history as a teacher of writer on virtuous leadership is these encounters I had with my students at Helsinki University. I was giving a class on the history of European integration. Yeah, I'm not a fan of European Union, and don't think I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the founders of European Union, which is a very different thing. I'm a fan of the founders of European Union, and I spent a lot of time explaining to those students what was in the head, in the hearts, and in the will of the founders of European Union. And then I discovered that the students, it works. The students were much more interested in human beings than in European law regulations. And then I began to think about my future career, and then I decided to quit with law and to practice, to do what I'm doing now, what I've been doing in the last 15 years or 20 years. So these were my students who brought me, in the end of the day, to the idea of virtuous leadership. It's not something that once walking on the street or sitting on a chair in a park like Rousseau had a vision. I never had any vision about it. I just saw my students asking more and more, requiring from me more and more ideas from this point of view. And then, because I had also philosophical education, I quit practice law. I came back to the good books, and I began to write those two books I have written. The first one, Leadership, has been translated into 15 languages now, including Chinese, which is a good sign because it means that the Chinese government, as the Academy of Science of China, recognizes that Chinese people can understand what we speak about. That means that we speak about human nature. It's not an ideology. This, is, for me, was a good point. So I'm not the first who is saying that leadership is character. That's obvious. I mean, in America, there have been a lot of books. Peter Drucker spoke about this already 50 years ago. Many writers on leadership have been saying that skills, there is no such a thing as leadership skills, although many people write about leadership skills. Fundamental leadership is mostly character. The most, I think, the specific thing in my system on leadership is the identification of the specific virtues of leaders, the identification of magnanimity and humility, greatness and service as being the key, the specific things of leaders. So many people like to speak about virtue. They like to speak about the four cardinal, the four fundamental virtues. You remember them? Prudence, courage, self-control, and justice. So, the idea was the following one, is many people focus on the four cardinal virtues, and they think that with those four cardinal virtues, as I mentioned, you have a leader. That's not right. With the four cardinal virtues, you have a good man or a good woman. That's what we have. And we have been we have been educating, especially in the Christian world, a lot of people that are good, but we have very few leaders, especially in Christianity, and especially the Catholic and the Orthodox world. Because we have not, I think this is what I think, sorry for being provocative a little bit, but I think the virtue of magnanimity, which is the virtue that makes people great, the virtue of action, the virtue of human hope, the virtues that help you focus on your talents, develop those talents, multiply them, put them at the service of society and the whole world, is something we've not spoken enough. So the problem has been that we have been educated in a humility that is very far from magnanimity, a kind of humility that excludes magnanimity, make it impossible. So my vision has been, when I've been studying a lot leadership, I came to the conclusion that every time we pronounce the word humility, we need to pronounce the word magnanimity immediately after. If not, we create a kind of people that will never become real leaders, will never be movers and shakers, will never change society, and the world will be always in the hand of those who are the magnanimous people, but they are outside Christianity.
So it's a view of the self, but also a view of the other.
So first it's a view of self, and then it's a view of what you have to achieve. Magnanimity is the virtue of human hope and the virtue of action, which means that magnanimity is a virtue that helps you to challenge people, to challenge yourself, to set high goals for yourself, high goals for the others. It gives you a sense of mission in life, the thing that you have to do, a sense of vocation. And first of all, it makes you aware of the talents that you have. That's the key thing really in leadership. A magnanimous person knows that he will achieve great things with talents, not with weaknesses. So when he looks at you, Ray, he thinks, what this man can do. He's not a cynic. He's not an agnostic. He's just a skeptic. He will think what that guy can do. He thinks in terms of talents. He thinks in terms of possibilities. So he's very optimistically minded. This is what we notice in magnanimous people. They are interested in what people can do. So this is the key thing in the magnanimity. It is this positive vision of what we are. It is the awareness, acknowledgement of those talents that we have received from God. Some people are shocked when people tell you, hey, I have those talents. They think it's a lack of modesty. I remember in America when the very famous American writer, Flannery O'Connor, said one day she was giving a talk like this talk today, and somebody stood up and asked her, Flannery, in the end of the day, why do you write? And she said, I write because I write well. And the people were shocked. They said, what's this lack of modesty? It's incredible that a woman like that said such a thing in public. And in the end of the day, she was giving them a lesson on magnanimity. She was telling them, I'd better know that I write well, because this is the only reason for why I'm writing. So because this is my responsibility before you, before society, before God. So I write because I write well. And you better know what you're good at. If not, you're small-minded people. You will not do anything. You will not contribute. You'll dead before being born. So she was giving them a good lesson on magnanimity. And these people thought this was a lack of humility. So magnanimity is the energy that leaders need to do the great thing. And humility is the direction that is given to that energy, so that with its energy you contribute, you serve human beings. Because leadership is not an individualistic exercise. It's about serving people. It's about transforming people. It's about educating people, educere, to draw out from people the best that is inside. This is what, in the end of the day, leaders do. They are purveyors of hope. They transform people with this hope. They educate them. They help them become fantastic human beings, magnificent persons, become real leaders themselves. This is why my definition of leadership is very simple. Leadership is about achieving greatness by bringing out the greatness in others. And for this you need two things, the virtue of magnanimity and the virtue of humility. If you have just humility, you will never, your service will never be a leadership service.
When I read the materials, preparing for tonight, I imagined being, I tried to put my cynical hat on for a moment and say, when I think of the good stories here of the good people who are leaders and the positive influences they have, and then I look around the world and I see a lot of people who are not so good people who are in positions of leadership, and they seem to be succeeding around. Is this a bit idealistic? Is it maybe that good leaders may achieve great good, but bad leaders often win the day?
I think the thing is very simple. I mean, if you practice what I'm speaking about, there may be good success. You may be successful because virtue, in the end of the day, gives you a certain success because it's a power. Prudence gives you the capacity to make the right decisions. This brings normally success. Courage gives you the capacity to stay the course, to stick to your decisions. This also is a power. Just as the capacity to communicate, to give people what is due to them, it's a real power. Virtus in Latin means power. So when you have a power, you're capable of making things that people that have not those powers cannot do. So in the end of the day, a virtue gives you the capacity to do certain things. But success depends very much on things that are totally independent of you. Imagine, you're married and you want family success. You have a beautiful wife, many children, and then suddenly there is a car accident and your wife becomes mad, psychiatrically mad. And you're 25 and she's 22. Who will tell you this is family success? This is a family disaster. But if you're virtuous, and if she's virtuous, and if the kids are virtuous, then this is a challenge for excellence. But nobody will say this is success. Thomas More was decapitated, beheaded. Who can speak about success? Joan of Arc was burned. She was 19. What kind of success is this? But these people are great leaders. They have an impact on humanity that is enormous. People read them. There are millions of institutions with the name Thomas More. There have never been so many movies about Joan of Arc nowadays than in the history of humanity. And this was 1,000 years ago. I mean, even the Japanese write doctoral thesis about Joan of Arc. They impress her. And this was, yes, 500 years ago. So the story is that virtue does not bring necessarily success. It fosters success. It makes it possible at many dimensions. But its success depends very much on things that do not depend on you. So what Viktor Frankl was used to say, normal people don't want success. They want plenitude of life. And plenitude of life is given by this energy that comes from freedom, from meaning, and this has little to do with what's happening around you. So the plenitude is about excellence, self-transformation, exercise of freedom. This is what gives, in the end of the day, happiness to people that are real. So this is very important because I speak especially to the young people here. Success, it's a wrong word. It's not what you want. This is not what you want. And I know that. People want fullness of life. They don't want success. It's good when you have success. But what you want more than at any price, you want plenitude of life. So a guy like Steve Jobs, for instance, you would say Steve Jobs is a successful person. He contributed a lot to many good things. We're very happy to have those iPads and iPods. So we like the aesthetics. The guy is interesting. But from the point of view of virtuous leadership, there is nothing here. He's a great manager. He's a great artist. He's probably a good man. He did a lot. But he's not an example of virtuous leadership. Because he liked beauty in things. He liked excellence in things. But when you look at the relation he has with the human beings, you see something here was totally missing. Totally missing. I mean, the magnanimity and humility thing is zero. He loved things more than human beings. He loved excellence in things more than he loved excellence in human beings. He was not an educator. He was not a father. He was not a mother. He was not a teacher. He was a man that contributed a lot to humanity. But to be a contributor is not the same thing as to be a virtuous leader. And people mixed up all those words, say he was a great contributor, then he's a great leader. When in the end of the day, these are very different things.
At the end of the book, you talk about the role of grace in the midst of it all. And as you were using your illustration a moment ago of that marriage with an accident at 25, I was thinking of the role of grace. Speaking to people who do not share your faith convictions along the way, how do you how do you put forward that needed aspect of grace in the midst of carrying it forward? What would you say to someone who says, I like what you say, I don't buy the faith background assumptions? Does this
I tell
have
them
something to say to them?
yes, of course. Maybe I don't say them anything, but I think. I think in my head about what am I giving them? Imagine I have many students of mine who don't believe in any God, who still like everything in the book until the last chapter. And the last chapter they begin and they give up. I tell them I don't tell them anything. I just tell them, okay, it's okay with this. You've read 90% of the book. Use what you can. But I think in my head, when you help people practice virtue, you help them know God unconsciously. Because God is beauty, and God is truth, and God is beauty, truth, and goodness. What is virtue? Virtue is exactly this. When you develop virtue, you get closer to the truth, you get closer to goodness, and you get closer to beauty. So people who practice virtue always get closer to God, which means they get closer to grace, but grace is always a gift of God to them. And there it's not my deal to give them grace, but it's my deal, it's my work it's my work to help them get closer to those things. So we can say whatever we want. By helping people practice human virtue, we always help them discover God in a way or another. So I'm doing my job.